There's a mist rolling through the cypress trees, and there are no noises except for birds. And there are like little waterfalls, and I am so stoked. And about a half hour in, I start to hear footsteps in the forest. And I look around me, and the monkeys are waking up and surrounding me and walking towards the path I'm on from the mountains. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so amazing. I FaceTimed my mom. And I'm like, Mom, look. And like, she's just staring at this monkey's ass. That's just walking in front of me. And
welcome to the Where Have You Been podcast. I'm your host, Bill Ream, and each week on the pod, I have conversations with incredible guests from all walks of life. Expect to hear funny, crazy, emotional, life-changing, and even sometimes life-threatening stories and experiences that will entertain and inspire you. As always, I appreciate your likes, subscriptions, ratings, and reviews wherever you are listening. It doesn't sound like much, but it truly helps the pod get to the ears of more people who may enjoy it. And check out the website, whybpodcast.com, for links to the socials where you can find pictures from the guests and their stories, and also buy merch if you're so inclined. Now let's get to this week's episode. Thank you for being here. Welcome into another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast. This time, I find myself time after time lately feeling very jealous when I'm talking to my guests about the places that they've been, and today is going to be no different. My guest today has, I'm sure, way more stories to tell than we can even possibly get to in one episode. So once again, hopefully, maybe this will be the first of a couple. But without further ado, one of my favorite phrases, let's let Joshua introduce himself. Joshua, who are you?
Hi, my name is Joshua Onysko, and it's great to be on your podcast. I love talking about travel. I just wrapped up 1 year of traveling just a couple days ago. So the timing is apropos, and I'm excited to be here and share some of the stories of my travels.
So, well, let me ask, where are you?
Right now, I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
Okay. And let's just, if you don't mind, tell the listeners, what do you do?
So I am the founder of Pangea Organics, Alpine Provisions, and Uja de Shek. They're all in the natural beauty space. Pangea is a organic skincare line. Alpine is body and hair care, and Uja de Shek is fine fragrances. And I have been in this industry for over 20 years, and I'm a self-trained perfumer and skincare chemist, hair care chemist. And I really have a passion for sustainability and sourcing, which is really probably the origin of a lot of my travel, was traveling the world to find amazing producers of amazing ingredients to make my fragrances and my skin and body care products.
And it really comes down to some things you can't find in one place because they're native to wherever, right? So if you want the best, the cleanest, whatever that is, you got to go.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, you can sit at your desk and source pretty much anything with the internet. But like with any industry, there are people around the world who are truly passionate about growing and producing the world's finest ingredients. And they probably make up 2 or 3% of the overall community of people growing any one certain type of ingredient. And so traveling has given me the opportunity to do what I call is face certification, meaning meeting the farmers, spending a day on the field, understanding their distillation process, their extraction process, seeing how they're treating their employees. And that has led us to having the world's best skin and body care products and fine fragrances.
And are you always looking to improve if it's possible?
Yeah, in fact, one of the trips my girlfriend and I just went on down in Argentina was meeting with a new supplier who I had never met in Patagonia. They're wildcrafting a lot of the wood essential oils that we use in Alpine Provisions products. And we were just absolutely blown away by the care and quality of the oils that they're producing. And honestly, I was on a kind of fragrance blog and saw them referenced, and I had never heard of them. They're very small. And I looked them up online and sent them, an info at email. And 3 minutes later, the owner emailed me back, and we ended up in a WhatsApp chat at 6:00 in the morning, going back and forth. And I said, I'm actually coming down to Argentina in just a few weeks. It'd be great to come out there and meet you. And he drove hours to come and meet us in El Bolson, which is this really beautiful town in the Patagonia region, and took us to many of the places where he wildcrafts. So wildcrafting is when you're not growing an agricultural crop, you're actually just finding it out in the wild. And so obviously Patagonia has a lot of pine trees, Douglas fir, ponderosa pine, and lots of other, bushes and shrubs that they're distilling. And not only were they creating really beautiful oils that we're already using in our products, but I learned about a lot of other oils that I'd never actually gotten to work with. And one of them is like Fabiana, which is this really beautiful, soft, leathery note that we're now experimenting in some new fragrances.
That's awesome. Side note, is Patagonia all that it's cracked up to be?
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I used to live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming in my late teens, early 20s as a young ski bum. And when I landed in Patagonia, it was really interesting because I was like, wow, this feels and looks very similar to the Tetons. And I looked it up, and the latitude is within 2 degrees as the same latitude as Jackson Hole in the north as Patagonia is in the south. And the flora and fauna is very similar. And I felt right at home there. And my girlfriend and I ended up trekking for a little over 4 days through Patagonia and got to meet a new supplier and had a really amazing time. Highly recommend Patagonia, but definitely do some prep work and getting in hiking shape because the hiking is no joke.
Yeah. Sounds like win-win when you were there for sure.
Absolutely.
I like to do this early because, as I say in other podcast episodes as well, that some people just don't have the time or lose track and don't make it through the entire episode. I want to make sure that we get your socials out there if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. My personal Instagram is joshua.scott.onysko, and that's Onysko. And that's primarily where people can find me. I am going to start creating TikTok reels for a lot of the travels. We just haven't gotten around to editing it yet, but that is my main social. And then Pangea Organics is just at Pangea Organics. And then Alpine Provisions is alpine.provisions on Instagram.
Excellent. And I'll make sure that I put links to the websites in the show notes after we're done. But I just wanted to make sure that gets out there so that people know where to follow you. And so moving on, I think it's awesome what you're doing. I think what you've built is really fantastic. And I think that people should definitely check it out. Even if it's something you wouldn't think that you would normally be into, I think it's well worth it. But I want to start getting into the travel stuff. I'd like to know, before we get into the bulk of the episode, when did travel start for you? Was it when you were young? Was there something that happened that really turned you onto it? Or was it like as you got older? How did it work for you?
Yeah, so I dropped out of school when I was 15. I grew up in Rhode Island. School was never really my thing. And I bought a 1972 Volkswagen Westfalia and restored it. And I was kind of driving around New England, going to Grateful Dead shows, and kind of got an early itch for localized travel and decided I wanted to move out to Jackson Hole because I love skiing and snowboarding. Drove out to Jackson Hole, spent a winter skiing and working, and saved up my money and got a passport. And that led me down to Costa Rica and Nicaragua. And I was volunteering for the Caribbean Coast Conservation, which is an organization that helps save sea turtles from poachers. And I got to Costa Rica and met a lot of other international travelers and really got a travel bug in a very big way being down there. And I ended up spending several months down there working and traveling and volunteering. And I got back to Jackson Hole and I only had one mission. And that mission was to make money to go travel. And after about 2 years, I'd saved up enough money to leave for a 2-year adventure in Asia. And I flew to Bombay and ended up traveling for 2 years through India, Nepal, Tibet, Cambodia, Thailand, and just had an incredible adventure. I, at one point, ran out of money and went to Hong Kong to teach English, which is what a lot of backpackers were doing back then. But I didn't really feel like I was able to get into the culture there. And I ended up flying to Japan. And within 24 hours, I was hired by someone from the Yakuza to sell fake Rolexes and Louis Vuitton bags in the red light district of Tokyo, and ended up doing that for several months, saving up money to continue traveling down through Southeast Asia.
I'd have to say if that 2 years wasn't life altering, I don't know what would be.
Yeah, I would say that, people always love asking the question because I've been to 46 countries now, I think. And people always ask, like, what was your favorite place or what country changed you the most? And I always have the same answer. It was India. I spent probably about 5.5 months traveling through India, and there's something about that country that just alters you in the way that you look at the world. And I always look back at that travel as a pivotal moment of really understanding there are many different ways you can travel. And I love getting deep into a culture. I generally stay away from really touristy areas or touristy activities. I like to get deep into a culture, meet and stay with locals. And I was able to do that in a very profound way in India. And it really set me up for understanding how I wanted to travel for the rest of my life.
I think it's a perfect segue. I think we should just jump right into where have you been? And let's, if you don't mind, let's start with India. I don't know a whole lot about it, but was there a moment that you can, maybe not necessarily a moment you can pinpoint, but was there like a time frame where you were just like, or even maybe an experience that you were like, wow, this place is special?
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't think there's anything that can really prepare you for traveling for several months through India. You really have to tap into an immense wellspring of patience. Because, here in the West, we're so used to just being able to get things done or find the thing you need or get the help you need, especially now. Back then, we just barely had email. I went there in 1999. There was definitely no cell phones, definitely no Airbnb or websites where you could figure things out. You had to travel by going to a cafe and either reading A Lonely Planet or talking to people. And, it was this really beautiful experience where I met so many people that became lifetime friends by just striking up a conversation at a cafe, talking to them about where they've been and where their favorite place was, and getting so many different people's views and triangulating on the world in a very different way that it just doesn't happen with the internet anymore. We think, we have so much more access to information, and it's true. And I have had amazing experiences that came from connections from the internet, but it doesn't replace actually going out into the world with no technology and just diving deep into knowing that you have to talk to people and meet people and find out how to solve problems. And being an entrepreneur, I would say that India specifically, but travel in general, has really honed in, has allowed me to hone in on the skills of solving problems, because solving problems is 95% of what it means to be an entrepreneur, and continuing to solve them without losing your vitality, without being discouraged, and when you're traveling, you have to solve problems. You don't have a solution. You can't just like push a button and get pulled out of a situation. You have to learn how to solve problems.
And especially more so back when, like you said, the internet existed, but the World Wide Web wasn't.
Yeah, I would have to wait an hour and a half at a like a internet cafe to send an email to tell my mom I was still alive.
Yeah.
And there are many times where you would write the email and then you would be staring at this line that was telling you it was being sent, because it was still being sent over phone lines.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it didn't send.
Oh, geez.
So it was like this, a very different time when it comes to communication and travel in general.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear a couple of stories. Tell me, people that you met, or, a place that you went and what happened. If you have, though, I mean, I know it's been 26 years now, but if there's anything that just still stands out to you today, that this experience was so awesome.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many in India. It's hard to choose, but there was.
Hey, you don't have to choose just one. I got all night.
Varanasi, which is where the famous ghats are. It's one of the oldest cities in the world. It's in northern India. I ended up there. Well, actually, to roll it back, I was in India and I went up to Nepal as a throughway because I wanted to get to Tibet for Losar, which is Tibetan New Year. And it's in February. So there was a lot of snow. The road was closed from an avalanche. And locals told me if you can wait and have patience, within 2 weeks, it'll open up and you can get up into Tibet. So I just kind of camped out in Kathmandu. And I was sitting on this rooftop reading a book. And something in my head said, go look over the roof down to the street. And I just got up and looked down there and I saw my friend Chunti, who is Indian American, who lived in Jackson Hole, running down the street. And I had no idea she was in Nepal or India. And I yelled her name, and I ran down there and gave her a hug. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to catch this bus, and like ran. And I ended up going up into Tibet and had this outstanding adventure. I met a British stock photographer. We hired a driver and we drove across the tundras of Tibet to be one of the first people to meet the Retting Lama, who had just been selected by the lamas. And the Retting Lama at that point was 2 years old, and was able to witness a Tibetan sky burial, which is just this really profound experience of how Tibetans have a funeral. They bring the bodies on their backs wrapped in burlap to a monastery high up in the mountains. And they bring offerings of vegetables and breads. And they bring the bodies to the monastery, and the monks perform the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which, to truncate what this is, it's basically a prayer to release the soul from the body. And the monks let us stay up there through this entire process and put us in this room. And I will never forget how cold this room was all night long. It was just really focusing on, is this cold enough where it might kill me if I fall asleep? Wow. And, and I've winter camped and backcountry skied and slept outside in the middle of the winter in Jackson Hole. This was so much colder than that. And in the morning, they brought the bodies up to the top of the mountain, and they ripped open the burlap bags, and all of a sudden there were 12 bodies on these rocks. And the monks were putting on these robes that were covered in dried blood, and they had swords and hooks, and the families were up there and they were burning juniper, and there was several hundred vultures on the ground. And the monks had to swing these barbed chains around their heads to keep the vultures from eating the bodies.
Oh,
and,
gosh.
I didn't know what was going on. So everything I was seeing I was learning about in real time. I didn't have any explanation of what was happening because nobody spoke English.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the monks started carving the bodies up and cutting them open and into pieces. And I had never seen anything like this. And what I learned was in Tibetan culture, they don't believe in breaking the skin for medicine. So they don't have like surgery. Everything is done externally. So the way they know about anatomy is through these sky burials. So they were really looking at what led to the demise of this certain person. And at one point, one of the monks calls me over, and the monk wants me to swing this chain. And so I'm now swinging this chain, and I'm just looking at hundreds of vultures, these huge vultures that are wanting to get past me. And I'm swinging this chain while these monks are cutting up bodies behind me. And after about 20 minutes, one of the monks comes and gets me and hands me one of the swords and wants to show me a tumor in this body. And I'm like, wow, this is really intense.
Now, could he speak English, or somehow he was conveying to you?
No, it was just conveying with gestures.
Mm-hmm.
And this went on for, I don't know, like an hour. And then at one point, they stopped cutting the bodies open. They stopped swinging the chain. And these vultures ate these 12 bodies in about 8 minutes. And they were gone. And that is what a Tibetan sky burial is, because you can't really dig into the earth there because it's tundra. And this is one of their traditions of a funeral.
Wow.
And it was...
What a profound and surreal and strange experience.
Yeah. I actually, a few years ago, I started a Medium. You can find me on Medium. I only have 5 or 6 articles on there, but one of them is me recanting the story because it's so vivid in my mind still to this day. And then, after going through Tibet, I lost, I think, over 25 pounds being in Tibet because I am vegan.
And real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the story you just told, that was with your friend that you just happened to come upon?
No, that was just a guy I met, a British stock photographer. I had gone up there by myself.
I didn't know if you had actually a chance to hang out with your friend that you hadn't seen that was catching the bus.
Oh, I'm getting to that point.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Sounds good. All right.
And so
Please.
Being vegan in Tibet is nearly impossible because they don't really have much in the way of vegetables. So I just kind of wasted away. And so after a month, I get to Nepal and I am starving. And I just literally eat for 4 hours once I get into Nepal. And then I travel down to Varanasi, which is, I can't really remember. It's a couple hours south of the border of Nepal, I think. And I go to a cafe and I see this woman wearing Tibetan earrings. And I have the same earrings that this guy had made for me. The men and the women wear these turquoise and coral earrings that they make. And I had some and I said, oh, did you go to Tibet? She's like, no, my friend did and gave me these earrings. I was like, oh, it's cool. And she was Italian. She was like, where are you from? I said, Wyoming. She's like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm meeting my friend from Wyoming here right now. And Chunti walks in.
No way.
And Chunti looks at me and she was like, what? And we ended up spending the next 3 days during Shivaratri, which is if I get this correct, it's a huge celebration. And it's the marriage of Shiva and Parvati, I believe. And it is just incredible. Sitar concerts, candlelit concerts on the Ganges, and chai and bong lassis. And it's a dry city, but they have tons of cannabis. So like cannabis lassis, cannabis cookies. And basically everyone is high and dancing and listening to music all night.
Wow.
And the morning comes around and my friend said she wasn't feeling well. And I was like, well, okay, I'm going to wander around because I'm not really tired yet. And I had decided that I needed to buy new underwear because in India, the Dobigats, which are how you get your clothes clean, they beat your clothes against rocks by the river. So eventually they just kind of disintegrate.
Sure.
So all my boxers had disintegrated, and there was a guy and his son that had all these men's clothing in an outdoor sales rack. And I'm a bigger guy and none of the underwear fit me. And it kind of turned into this like joke because there was like a bunch of locals laughing that like they would bring the underwear and I would hold it up to myself and be like, no, there's no way. So he kept sending his son somewhere to get bigger underwear. And this is going on for like 20 minutes. And this gentleman who probably was in his 80s, who was a sadhu, which is like a spiritual person who lives in India. You've probably seen photos of like dreadlocks, paint on their face, usually like long, very colorful robes.
Okay. Yeah.
And, and he's smoking a beedi, which is a little Indian hand-rolled cigarette, and he has these piercing blue eyes. He's wearing a blue like robe, and he's just staring into my soul from like an alleyway. And I hadn't slept all night. I'm like, why is this guy staring at me?
This is like from a movie or something.
Literally. And he says, come here. And I was like, okay, I need to see what this guy wants.
I think you have to.
And I walk up to him and he takes my right hand with both of his hands as he's smoking the beedi. And he says, you have a very interesting life. I want to read your chart. And I'm like, no, I don't want to have my chart read. I'm so tired. And he's like, come with me. I'll make you chai. And I was like, what the hell? So we go down this road and into this little, like, I call it a urban cave because it was literally like a hole in a wall underneath these buildings. And inside were just hundreds of handwritten books and incense burning and chai in a copper pot. And he says, sit, sit, sit. So he asked me my birthday and he pulls out some books and he starts just writing like all of this stuff that I can't understand. And after about a half hour, he starts telling me about my entire history of my life. And he was getting so many things right. And I'm personally not a big believer in astrology, even though the story would lead you to believe I am. Mm-hmm. He's telling me all these things about my life. And then he said, now let's talk about your future.
Oh, boy.
And he starts going into deep detail about the life I'm going to lead. And hours go by, and I'm now fading. I'm falling asleep. And I say, this has been really lovely. It's so great meeting you, but I do have to go. And he said, okay, before you go, and he opens up this book. And in the book is this old picture of Goldie Hawn. And he said, you might know another American friend of mine. I said, of course, I know who Goldie Hawn is, but I don't know her personally. And he said, someday you will. And I was like, okay. So I go home, sleep, and I continue traveling for the next year and a half.
Now we're into the early 2000s, right? 2001.
Yeah, now we're in 2001. I am at the end of my travels. I'm in Cambodia, and I'm out of money. I'm emotionally and physically just drained. And I had thought about starting a company called Pangea because before I left on this trip, I had made a batch of soap, handmade soap with my mom. And I kind of became fascinated by like soap is made from natural ingredients. And while I was traveling, I learned where a lot of these ingredients are coming from. And I decided that when I went back, I was going to start a soap company called Pangea. And so I moved to Boulder, Colorado, and I start Pangea in my garage with a beer keg and a paint mixer and get into perfumery and cosmetic chemistry and get into, creating clean beauty products. And it's now 2005 and I'm driving to Aspen to meet some friends for a camping trip and my cell phone rings.
And at this point, you are selling product, like your businesses are going.
Yeah. Pangea is out in the world and doing very well. And this gentleman introduces himself and he said, I'm so sorry to call you unannounced, but we have mutual friends. And I have a client that's really interested in what you're doing with Pangea. And I'm a A-list celebrity manager in Hollywood. And I was like, who is it? And he said, Goldie Hawn. And I just pulled the car over because I had, until that moment, forgotten all about this.
Absolutely.
And he said, "Are you ever in LA?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm actually going to be there in 2 weeks for a trade show." And he said, "They'd love to meet you." And so 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in Goldie and Kurt Russell's living room, and Goldie walks out. She gives me a big hug, and I say into her ear, I'm like, "I'm pretty sure Blue Baba sent me here." And she starts crying, and she's like, "Blue Baba just passed away recently," and tells me this whole story on how she met him in 1982, right there where I had met him. And
oh my God,
it was crazy.
I just got chills.
Yeah, it was a life-changing experience of knowing really that there's people out in the world that have just insight into what's going on in the world that are above and beyond scientifically proven.
Has every stage of your life almost felt scripted? Like
No, I mean,
meant to happen. I mean, all of that is amazing.
I still fully believe in free will. This is an ongoing conversation and debate between myself and a lot of my friends, because I have a lot of friends that are more in the tech world. And, I've just seen so many incredible things happen that, people use the term manifest. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're manifesting every moment, because in every moment you have the ability to choose something that is not the normal path. And I really subscribe to the idea that 80% of our thoughts as human beings are usually repetitive. And if you track it throughout the day, you really realize that the repetitive thought is usually regret or remorse. And for the point of what I'm trying to convey, regret is when you didn't do something you wish you had. And remorse is when you did do something you wish you hadn't.
Yeah.
And a big part of life is trying to have unique, inspirational, independent thought. And the way you can have more independent, interesting thought is removing repetitive thought. And if you want to remove repetitive thought, you need to lead a life that has as little regret and remorse as possible.
Sure.
And so in every decision that you have, you can sit there and think, is this going to cause regret or remorse? And if you look at the world through that lens and look at your day throughout that lens, you inevitably make decisions in your life that create profound experiences. You meet profound people. You do profound things. And I do think that is one of the main keys of having an interesting life.
Yeah. You're going to have quotes I'm going to want to write down and staple to my wall. I'm sure of it. Really awesome. What a great great start. Oh my gosh. Awesome. I'd love to talk more about celebrities that you've met, but that doesn't necessarily have to be anything that we do here. As far as India goes, I have a feeling there's more, but you told some fantastic stories. Is there more that you'd like to talk about there? I'm going to kind of let you steer the show, man. This is great.
I would say that, yes, there was a lot of things that led to lifelong friendships and things that directed my life in a different way there. But I mean, I'm still having these experiences. I just wrapped up a year of travel, which started in Japan last April and ended in Japan last week. And
do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was able to get work to a place where I could work remote, right? We're in that age where you can still run companies with a strong internet connection.
Sure.
And I went to Japan, and my plan was to go to Japan, come back to the States, and I'd put a deposit on a large Airstream and a truck. And I was going to spend 8 months traveling North America in this Airstream and documenting travels and outdoor experiences. And I was sitting in this moss temple in Kyoto. It's one of the oldest Zen gardens in the world. And something inside of me just said, no, scrap that plan. You need to go to Europe. And so I called up the Airstream dealer and gave up my deposit and booked a one-way ticket to London. And I went to London, saw some friends, and then my friends had rented a house in Portugal, and I have a bunch of friends in Portugal. So I ended up spending 3 weeks. I rented a Eurovan traveling around Portugal. I went to see friends in Berlin. And then I'm half Italian, and I had only been to Milan once for a trade show, and I really wanted to explore more of my family history in Italy. So I flew down to Rome. I rented a car for a month, and I just started driving. I had no reservations. I didn't know where I was going. My friend Peter is a Buddhist teacher, and he was leading a retreat kind of up north in Tuscany. And I met up with him, and we started driving around. And we were just going from like random town to random town, getting random Airbnbs. And we pulled into Siena, which is a town. And I didn't know what the Palio was, but the Palio is this massive old world horse race that happens between all of the neighborhoods. You know, it's like a friendly 5-minute horse race.
Is it in like a square?
Yeah.
A large square? I've heard of it. Yep.
Yeah. And the town is going nuts. Like people are partying. They're wearing these like silk scarves that represent their neighborhood, their contradas.
And it's a huge deal, whichever one wins. It's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. But it's also pouring rain out. Oh, and I'm also an animal rights activist. Don't really like horse races. Horses generally get hurt. And I said, Peter, I don't want to go to this race. I don't want to support this race. And he's like, come on, man, we're here. Let's just go and see it for a cultural experience. And I said, okay, I'll go with you because you're on this road trip with me. And we start walking in the rain, and thousands of people are moving through the streets in one direction. So Peter and I just start following these people, and it's pouring rain. And I'm like, Peter, how do you know they're going to where the race is? And he looks at me and he said, what do you mean? Of course they're going where the race is. Like, where else would they be going? And I looked at this girl and I said, is the race canceled? She said, yeah, we're all going to the bars. So we walk into an osteria, which is like a small like wine bar with food. Mm-hmm. And we sit at the outside of a bar looking in, and there's 2 women on the other side of the bar. And I start talking to one of them, and she lives in New York, and she's a chef at Blue Hill. And we start talking about food because my biggest passion is cooking. And I host a lot of dinner parties, and I have my entire life. And,
still waiting for my first invite, but that's okay. I've known you for 2 days.
Come up to New York. And her and I exchanged numbers. And the next day, I was starting to drive up to the south of France to meet one of our suppliers that supplies our rosemary and lavender and sage. And I said, I'm going to see, this woman was woofing on an organic vineyard, and which is when you volunteer, because she was really into wine. She's really into wine. And I texted her and I said, hey, I'm going to Lucca next weekend if you'd like to go. And like, we ended up going to Lucca and exploring Lucca and fell in love. And we've been traveling together ever since.
I'm going to say I knew where the story was going, but that's awesome, man. That's so awesome. Yeah, when you said that something told you to go to Europe, yeah, I knew it.
Yeah, it was really strange. I mean, I was really dug in like a tick on this Airstream trip.
Yeah.
And I've always learned to follow my intuition. It's definitely a very powerful thing when you tap into like what your heart is telling you to do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that actually, and I didn't want to interrupt your stories, but yeah, I was going to ask you, is that something that you've kind of always just been able to listen to that and actually follow through? Because a lot of people will ignore things like that and just say, no, that's not the logical thing to do. I already put the deposit down. I can't lose the money. Plan this for how long I got to do it. But yeah, in your mind, did you also think for a minute, like, I can still do that? It's just not now.
I usually say practicality is the absolute worst travel companion.
Sure.
And you just
depending on what you're looking for. But if you're just out to just really create experiences that you can never replicate, like, I agree 100%.
Yeah. So I would say that yes, in general,
Logic doesn't necessarily matter. It's a feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the day I dropped out of school, I really didn't like school. There were two teachers that I liked. One was my art teacher who really understood me and I loved making art. And one was a Shakespeare English teacher. But other than that, like I just didn't fit into academia. But this other teacher I had gave us the assignment of writing a poem, which I had never done. And I went home and I wrote my first poem and I was like, wow, I really enjoyed that. And I was so excited that there was something I actually enjoyed. And this particular teacher was a known alcoholic, kind of just like a battle axe. I don't actually know what that term means, but I think it makes sense. And
Okay.
she gave me a D.
Oh no.
And
it's all subjective. How do you get a D?
Exactly.
Unless it's rhyme and pentameter.
No, it wasn't. And I was furious. And I just walked up there, crumpled it up, threw it at her, walked out of school, never went back.
That was it?
That was it.
That was the day.
I just knew in that moment, I was like, I am not meant for this place.
Was your family what was your family thinking about that?
My parents were very supportive. My mom has the saying that she tells people that I left home 2 weeks after I was born. I was always very independent. I started working when I was 7 and I've been working ever since.
When did your family come? Like how many generations in America?
My great grandparents immigrated in the early 1900s. And they were Italian farmers, and my grandparents were born here. And the other half of me, my dad's side, is Ukrainian, and same trajectory. I
think it's absolutely incredible to have the support in that generation to not be. And maybe it was a better thing to not be like first or second generation immigrants, because typically in my experience with people I talk to, your parents always want better for you than what they had, right?
Yeah.
And so for, at least in my family, in my generations, better meant go to school, stay in school, get a degree, go to college, And so I love that your family was supportive. That's incredible. Because you probably would, well, I wouldn't say probably. You may not be where you are today if that hadn't happened.
Yeah, I'm very grateful.
That's awesome. So you're in Italy, you've fallen in love, and did she travel more with you? Because that was relatively early on in your trip, wasn't it?
It was 3 months in, and then we traveled together for a week. We went to Florence. I had months left in Europe.
So in that early time, like that, I mean, it was a couple weeks, like you knew.
Yeah, we both knew pretty early on. And then she had to leave. She went to, I think, Croatia with her mom, and then was going back to New York. And I was like, I guess I'll see you in 2 months, And it was like this kind of crazy feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, probably like 3 weeks went by. And someone mentioned to me, how are you staying in Europe so long? Didn't your visa run out? And I thought, oh no, I am on a visa.
Oh no.
And I had like basically given myself into this kind of life living in Tuscany and completely forgot about a visa. And
what are the rules of that? Like, because I know some places, as long as you leave, like my daughter went to school in the Czech Republic, and granted she was on a student visa, things are a little bit different, but there's places that, you can go that literally you leave for a day, you come back, you're good.
A lot more lenient, but for my visa, I had 90 days within a 6-month period. And so I couldn't leave and come back. Okay. And when I had this realization, I had 3 days left on my visa. And basically my friend had invited me up to a dinner in Copenhagen. So I flew out to Copenhagen and flew out of Copenhagen back to Colorado. Yeah, I came back to Colorado basically at day 90.
Wow. Did you spend time in Copenhagen more than just like getting there and flying out? Yeah, I've been there
a couple times. It's a super beautiful city.
It's on my list. It's on my short list. Like I have a long list, but it's on my short list. I want to be there so bad.
Yep.
I want to see it. Cool. I want to eat the food. I want to meet the people. The food is
spectacular.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sort of derail the conversation, but you went back home. And was that the end of the trip? Because you still had Japan, you still had Asia. So you've had to fly back, or you flew back home, but then you went back.
I flew back. I went back, and then we were in New York for a few months, and then after basically in December, we traveled down to Mexico City, and then Oaxaca, and then
Beautiful.
Cuba. Mm-hmm. And then from Cuba, we went to Colombia to Argentina to Chile to Vietnam. We rented a motorcycle and motorcycled the entire length of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City to Hanoi, which I've been adventure motorcycling my whole life. And this was the most dangerous place to drive a motorcycle.
Why?
They have no traffic laws whatsoever.
Oh,
it was pretty insane. And I rode a motorcycle in India, which is notoriously the worst place in the world to drive. My opinion is way worse in Vietnam, but the people and the culture and the country was absolutely astounding.
Vietnam is also on my short list, by the way.
So beautiful. Oh my God. And the food and the clothing and the
cost,
topography.
Once you get there, it's next to nothing.
Yeah. I mean, there are places where it was a little expensive compared to other places, but yeah, I mean, we were spending nothing being there. Oh, and the coffee. They have great coffee. So we're both coffee fanatics. So being places that really appreciate good coffee.
Are you fanatics or are you snobs?
No, we're fanatics. Okay. I wouldn't say we're snobs because I'll drink mediocre coffee for the caffeine in the morning.
I have a feeling you're more in it for the purity than I need the extra foam and the.
Yeah, no, I'm a black Americano guy.
Yes.
I don't do any of the milk or foam unless there's a cafe who's making their own almond milk from scratch.
Okay.
I will drink that because I want the taste, the experience. Mm-hmm. But I don't mess with the coffee.
So continue. Keep telling me.
So after Vietnam, we went to Bali. Bali has been this place that people have been talking about since I was traveling in India. So for 25 years, friends going to Bali, friends living in Bali, the digital nomads, blah, blah, blah. And one of my best friends lived there for 3 years, always talking about Bali. And I think I never went because it's just this super popular place. And I went and I was so sad. And I'm probably one of the few people that will say it like this, but neocolonialism is a huge problem for me. It's happening in Costa Rica where people from an economy that is much stronger than theirs go in there and buy land and build huge houses. And then one minute there's this beautiful local culture and cuisine. And the next minute you can't even find local food. It's just it's like lattes and avocado toast. And
it's happening most on the west coast of Costa Rica, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it's
northern west.
It's just sad, and locals are being pushed out of the towns, and it's all under the guise of but we're bringing so much money to the community. I'm like, but that's not true.
So not necessary either.
It's not true, and I saw that in Bali, but it wasn't just that. There is so much trash there. Just plastic garbage in the ocean, in the rivers, on the streets, in the woods. And there's all these people, foreigners, living there, under the guise of living the luxury lifestyle for next to nothing. I'm like, yeah, but the price is you're destroying the culture here and destroying the earth.
Right. I was going to say, it's not the locals. It's not the natives that are doing that. Right.
No. And it's just, I really, as an environmentalist and someone who loves culture, because the Balinese people are some of the most beautiful people, most beautiful culture I have ever seen in my life. They are so nice, so peaceful, and so giving and sharing and sweet and honest and caring. So it broke my heart even more to be there and see the destruction of this really beautiful island. And I couldn't stand it. After 2 weeks, we left. I was just like, we were on this beach that was lined with all these like European Ibiza style beach clubs. And there was thousands of pounds of garbage on the beach while people were like drinking cocktails and toasting wine and candlelit. And I'm just looking at the beach. I'm like, is everyone just looking past this giant line
it's like
of garbage?
It's like blinders.
Yeah. And then, we were in, I forgot the town. We were in this other town. And there's like so many like Instagram models and influencers there taking photos in this cove that's famous. And I go in there just to like dip into the ocean. And I look down into the ocean. And I'm a diver and I've spent a lot of time in oceans all over the world. I have never seen this. There was just plastic garbage floating around in the ocean, just hundreds and hundreds of pieces. And people were just wading in it, taking selfies and doing photo shoots. And I was like, the whole world is just seeing these people living these extravagant luxury tropical vacations in Bali, but they're not seeing this intense amount of garbage and the destruction of an ecosystem. And it just made me so sad.
The camera angles are just right. Sure. I mean, they're not getting the garbage in the shots even though it's right next to them. I've heard about things like that where like people commenting about like Instagram photos and stuff, like how beautiful and how perfect this picture looks. But if you could just see to the left or the right of whatever they're taking and see what's really happening, and I'm not necessarily saying Bali, but anywhere in the world where things like this happen, everyone tries to make sure that they pick out the perfect photo. Yep. And it's not reality.
Yeah.
It's too bad.
And unfortunately it's happening in more, it's like, it happened in Tulum. It's happening in Costa Rica. It's happening in other parts of Mexico, Cabo, San Jose del Cabo. But Bali really hit me hard. I was like, oh my God, just people are not, they just don't care. There's amazing organizations there that are trying to do like a lot of beach cleanups and making things out of the garbage. But
but the worst part of
the problem with plastic pollution is beach cleanups are great and they're good for social media, but I have this unpopular opinion that it's actually not good to do a beach cleanup because you clean up the beach and everyone just pretends the problem doesn't exist.
Sure.
It's like in America, we don't know how much garbage we're producing because we put it in a bag, we put it out in the street, and it disappears and we never see it again.
Yeah, once it's gone, it's out of your mind. We assume that it's being taken care of properly.
Yeah, but it's a lot of times it's not. We dump 46,000 jumbo jets of plastic into the ocean every year.
Unbelievable.
But we are the second largest consumeristic country in the world. So not only are we producing a lot of garbage, we're also, most of the corporations that are making a lot of the garbage that is being sold overseas also are American companies. So I really hope that people, as they travel, start to take more responsibility for the impact they're having on culture, on the environment, because what I've been seeing for the past several years is it's just sad, and I think we need to get to a point where we don't need to go somewhere that's beautiful and then make it like California. We don't need to own homes all over the world. We don't need to, go to a culture, rent an Airbnb from a local family, eat the local food, do what you can to like leave a small enough footprint where you're not ruining the environment, and thank that place for existing and then leave.
Yeah.
We don't need to go take over beautiful places.
Another quote from my wall. What are your feelings on, just because you said that, and the first place that comes to my mind is Japan, because it is, if I know correctly, and I haven't been there, but it's, again, short list, it's very clean. And there's so many people.
It's beyond clean.
There's so many people. So thoughts, feelings, and again, it's a story podcast, even though I label it travel. It's a story podcast, but I just want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, my thoughts are Japan is an extremely clean culture, and they do burn all of their trash that is non-recyclable. So like they burn plastic, they burn paper, they recycle glass and aluminum, I believe. I've never looked really deep into the systems they're using. I've been told they're extremely advanced systems that have very little
like emissions,
but inevitably everything there is wrapped in plastic, just like it is here, and probably even more so there. Like you go into grocery stores and like produce has like plastic around it. So I think there's a limit of when a culture becomes too clean. It's not good for the environment. Yeah. But it is an amazing culture. I've now been there, I think, 6 or 7 times, and I love it every time. There's so much interesting culture and processes and crafts and foods and things to experience there. It's really beautiful.
I know for sure that you have to have stories that when someone says, you guys sit down and have a beer or whatever your drink of choice is, a nice glass of wine, and they say, "Oh, you've been to Japan?" There has to be stories that you have that just stand out to you that this experience was incredible, whether it's the temples or the fauna or just interacting with people and finding this place that was just incredible. You've got something.
Yeah, last year, I think everyone remembers this like iconic National Geographic magazine from like the 80s that had these snow monkeys sitting in hot springs on the front cover. It's like one of the most iconic.
I don't know if I do, but I'll find it.
Yeah. Once you find it, be like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. It was very iconic. It was these monkeys.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? I can picture it. I have seen it.
They're monkeys sitting in a hot spring.
Yes.
So like ever since I was a little kid, this idea burned in my head. And those monkeys live in the mountains of Japan. And of all the times I'd been to Japan, I was never able to make it there because it's kind of out of the way. And last year in April, I was like, I am going to see these snow monkeys. So I get on this train, which gets to a smaller train, which gets to this little town. And I check into a ryokan, which is like a small, like Sento / hotel. And I say to the woman, hey, can you, because there's no like other transportation there. I'm like, hey, can you get me a taxi to pick me up at 7 a.m.? She's like, where do you have to go at 7 a.m.? I was like, I need to go to the snow monkey park. She's like, oh, it doesn't open till 9. I was like, no. I was like, I am waking up with these monkeys. I'm not waiting till the gates open at 9. And she was like, they're not going to let you in. And I was like, can you get me a taxi? And she's like, I'll try, but like no taxis are running. And a couple hours later, she's like, hey, I found a guy who will take you. I'm like, great. So I wake up at 6 o'clock and I am so happy that I'm going to see these snow monkeys.
Sure.
So the guy's like, asking me like, what are you doing at 7 a.m. going up the mountain? And I was like, going to see the snow monkeys. So I get to the mountain. There's nobody there. And
of course,
and there's like I want to say like a 40-minute hike up the mountain to get to where these hot springs are. And I start walking and it is the most beautiful morning. It's like 48 degrees. There's a mist rolling through the cypress trees and there are no noises except for birds. And there are like little waterfalls and I am so stoked. And about a half hour in, I start to hear footsteps in the forest. And I look around me and the monkeys are waking up and surrounding me and walking towards the path I'm on from the mountains. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so amazing. I FaceTimed my mom and I'm like, Mom, look. And like, she's just staring at this monkey's ass. That's just walking in front of me. And all of a sudden there's like 50 monkeys and they're little tiny babies clinging to them. And they're just bringing me to the hot springs.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, this is so incredible. I'm so happy. So we walk all the way to the hot springs. There's not a soul there. And I spend an hour just sitting there Everyone asked me, did you get in? No, I did not get in the hot springs. That's super gross. I spent an hour watching mama monkeys clean baby monkeys and preen the alpha male and go in the hot springs and run around and eat grubs off each other with no one else there for like an hour straight. And then at 9:00, hundreds of tourists show up, hundreds. And I just pack up my stuff and I walk out and I was like, yes, that was the exact experience that I wanted. It was so amazing.
Please tell me, because one of the things I'll ask you to do is to send me some photos that we can post on Instagram. Please. I know you have photos, right? Oh,
I have hundreds of photos of these monkeys.
Oh, God. I closed my eyes and I actually visualized that whole thing. That was wonderful. That's really awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
Anything else from Japan that stands out? You've been so many places, and that your list is pretty incredible with places that I've never been, or maybe a lot of that I haven't really thought about going, but I want to go to Costa Rica because I've been there a number of times, and I think we both share a love of that place. But anything else in Japan, Asia as a whole?
I mean, Vietnam.
Oh, yeah, please.
Vietnam, I would honestly say, if you're an experienced motorcyclist, get a motorcycle. If you're not, I would not. I mean, I know thousands of people do it every year. Oh my God, it is gnarly riding there. So, but motorcycle is super beautiful. Otherwise, there's tours you can take or buses you can take, much safer. Cambodia was also life-changing because I learned a lot about the genocide there and how the people recovered from the genocide. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, that was really beautiful seeing.
And any story that stands out to you there?
No, it was at the end of my trip and I was pretty burned out and really trudging through being there, but nothing really spectacular happened. It was just kind of a beautiful culture.
Yeah, it still impacted you.
Yeah, it still impacted me for sure.
Well, let's move on to Costa Rica if you don't mind. Where have you been in Costa Rica? Have you been all over the country?
Yeah, so when I went there when I was 19, I literally traveled the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of amazing experiences there. I crossed the Osa Peninsula and ran into a black jaguar, which was really this profound experience of locking eyes with a black jaguar. And at that point in my life, I had never seen a large cat.
And where was this? And were you alone?
The Osa Peninsula? No, I was with 3 other backpackers that I'd met, and we were crossing,
just hiking,
Osa.
Walking.
Yep. That was really, really crazy.
How did that end? Obviously good.
Yeah, it ended good. It was
you won the stare down.
Yeah, it was in a tree, and it didn't seem aggressive. It was just checking us out, and we just locked eyes with this thing, and eventually it came down the tree, and we were like, "Whoa, what's happening right now?" Because it wasn't huge, but it was a jaguar.
It still could hurt you immensely.
It could still kill us, for sure.
Mm-hmm, yeah. I didn't want to say that, but yes, it could.
Yeah. And then it kind of sussed us out, but I think because there was 4 of us, it just kind of meandered off. And then we made it to the ocean, and we all went swimming in the ocean. And it was the first time I thought that the ocean was going to kill me, because these waves were just crushing over us.
So that's the Pacific side.
Yeah. And then all these jellyfish started stinging everyone.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It was pretty interesting.
Was that the only time you were there, 19? Or have you been since?
No, I've been 5 times, but honestly, I'm probably, unfortunately, not going to be going back, because the neocolonialism really hit me hard last time. I was in Nosara and couldn't find gallo pinto, and a coffee was $5. And my friend, who is Costa Rican, literally burst down to tears because she works there every winter and could not find even a room to rent. She's I've been working here my whole life, and I can't even rent a room here. There's nothing available. And I was this is so sad.
That's terrible. And how are you in a place where there's no gallo pinto?
I know. I
Oh
know.
my gosh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
I actually spoke with a different guest about the Caribbean side of Costa Rica, which is where I actually fell in love with Costa Rica.
What town?
Although, I wish I could remember. It was very far south. It was almost near
Limon?
Panama. Say again?
Was it Dominical or Limon?
May have been Limon, actually.
Yeah. Really
Yeah,
beautiful.
very beautiful. And I just love the Caribbean feel. I just love the vibe there. I loved how laid back everything was. And granted, it's Tico time when you're in Costa Rica anyway.
Yeah.
But when you're on that side and just listening to the music, and I don't know, I just love the vibe.
Yep.
I have some cool stories of being there, but that's for another day.
Yeah.
But so before we get to the end, which is nearing, I just want to touch on, a couple of other places that I've been to that I've loved. Where in Colombia have you been? Have you been all over, or?
We were just in Bogota. We actually stopped there because we were in Cuba, and Cuba was shocking to us. Like, we both had a very different idea of what Cuba was. But when you're not staying at a resort in Cuba, Cuba is both beautiful and the people are amazing, but it's also very sad. Like, there is a huge food shortage. The electricity flickers on and off. There's barely any Wi-Fi. If you're American, your phone shuts off as soon as you get there. Like, there's no cell service whatsoever. And so because we are working and traveling, it was very difficult to stay more than like 10 days there. So we flew to Bogota on the way to Patagonia to work. But I want to go back because Bogota was super beautiful, amazing city with amazing food and culture. And yeah, it felt really good there.
Agreed. Have you been to Medellin?
No, that we just spent 4 days in Bogota. That was it.
Oh, please make it a point. It's one of the most impactful places that I've been to. It was really incredible to be there, and that's a place that I would love to go back. And I'm not a person who typically likes to go back.
Yeah.
But because it was part of a relatively short trip to see, like, the ultimate point we were going to was Machu Picchu. But so we started in Medellin, went to Lima, spent a couple days, went to Cusco, did Machu Picchu, and then we went through Bogota on the way back out. And an amazing trip. Every place that we went to was beautiful and incredible, but Medellin was life-changing for me.
Yeah,
So,
I'm definitely going to make it eventually.
yeah, really awesome. Any of the other places that are on your list that we haven't talked about, that there's just an amazing story that we should hear?
I mean, I think there's so many, but that's a pretty decent chunk.
Yeah. Canada? Where in Canada have you been?
I've been all over Canada. I got on a freight boat from Bellingham, Washington, all the way up the Inside Passage to Alaska one summer and spent an entire summer hitchhiking through the Northwest Territories, through all of Alaska, and then all the way back down to Wyoming over 6 months. And that trip, I had a lot of crazy experiences. I was living in a bivy sack. So it's not even a tent. It's just like a waterproof shell that covers your sleeping bag.
Every night?
Every night. Yeah, it was really amazing. Oh my God. I haven't been back since, but that was an amazing experience.
When was that?
That was 2001.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Is there, okay, so you said crazy stories. Give me the craziest and we'll get to the end here.
The craziest.
Pick one or two.
Well, this isn't a crazy story, but it did have a huge impact on me. It was the end of the summer. It was getting cold. And I was like, all right, I need to get back to work. So I started hitchhiking and I got across the border into the Yukon, or is it the Pacific West, or is it the Northwest Territories? One of those two. I think I got into the Yukon, and I was on the Alcan, the highway, And this guy in a brand new Ford F-350 picks me up. And I was like, where are you going? He's like, I'm going back to Michigan. And I was like, oh, amazing. Like, if you could just drop me off, like, when you get down to, like, north of Montana. He's like, yeah, no problem. So, of course, we're in the car for 4 or 5 days together. I'm camping. He's got a camper in his truck, and he's a retiree, and he tells me his life story. And he basically worked for Ford his entire life. And his entire life, him and his wife had planned when they retired to buy an F-350 and a camper and go to Alaska.
Oh, no.
And 6 months before he retired, his wife died of a heart attack.
I saw that coming.
And 2 years later, he was like, I want to make this trip. So he made the trip. And he said to me, he's like, it's really great that you're doing this traveling now, because I told him where I'd been. He's like, because don't wait. Yeah. Just do it now. He's like, life just moves so fast. 1,000%. And it really stuck with me. I mean, I was already on that track, but I think about him often and not wanting to wait to live your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I've lived my life that way since I really learned what travel is. And, we've tried to raise our kids understanding that it's cool to have nice things, and it's, tangible stuff it is what it is, but memories are forever. And so we've tried to do that for them as they've grown up, and tried to do more of our gifting is more things that can create experiences. And
absolutely.
It's because it's so much more valuable that doesn't go away. God. It doesn't break. It doesn't get outdated. It just is what it is. So yeah, man.
Couldn't agree more. That is good parenting right there.
Awesome. So I won't ask you for more stories necessarily, but I do have a few questions before we wrap.
Yep.
I want to know, first of all, thank goodness, I finally have somebody who's probably considered a foodie, somebody who enjoys cooking and is a quote-unquote amateur professional chef.
I mean, I've been cooking my whole life, and I would say that if I wanted to be a professional chef, I could be a professional chef. That being said, I would never work at a restaurant.
Yeah,
because I was a waiter and a bartender and like all kinds of things early on in my life, and like that restaurant culture is really toxic a lot of the times. And as much as I fantasize about it, I love hosting my dinner parties and cooking for my friends and introducing new people. And sometimes I just show up in a new country and take over someone's kitchen just to get people together.
Yeah. Have you ever been to
11 Madison Park?
11 Madison Park.
No, I haven't been, but I'm going to go now because now it's vegan.
Yes, it has been for a few years since the
pandemic.
The owner who they were partners, but the one who wrote the book sold out to his partner, and yeah, they made it. But I from what I understand, the quality is just as good, if not better, as it was before.
Yeah, I actually his name is Daniel Hume.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
We listened to a couple of his podcasts about his story and turning the restaurant vegan and why it's vegan. When we were, where were we? Like in Argentina. Oh no, in Peru. We were driving through the Sacred Valley and listened to it. It was a really beautiful story. So we decided that we are going to go when we go back to New York. But the honest truth is, so when I said I went to Copenhagen, one of my friends used to be the head chef at Noma. And they have vegetable season. So like the meal was vegan. So I went and had dinner at Noma, and it was really inspiring and super beautiful. But the truth is, I generally don't prefer fine dining. I prefer more casual experiences. Fine dining sometimes gets too particular and too fancy, and I don't enjoy the experience as much as just eating an amazing curry or having an amazing gnocchi and pesto made by a grandma somewhere, like, or eating like fresh sourdough coming out of a wood oven the grains were ground, on location and grown 3 miles away. I'm more in that vein of cooking. I do cook fancy food, but for me, it's more cathartic and I enjoy the experience. But when it comes to dining, I've learned that I just don't like really fully enjoy the fine dining Michelin star world as much as I do just eating.
Yeah, I get that. So that said, what place that you've been has the best food? What's the best, and maybe even the best meal you've ever had outside of
there is
your
no
kitchen?
way of, I mean, my mom still makes things that I think about and that I can't wait to eat when I go home. Like she makes this zucchini stuffed pizza. That's really amazing.
Right. Mom's going to listen to the podcast, but
yep. But I mean,
besides
honestly,
mom,
like, I'm not going to lie. 9 out of 10 times restaurants disappoint me. I'm just going to be honest. I think that restaurants are operating in an extremely high pressure situation with extremely low margins, and it is very difficult to create a memorable experience at a restaurant. I truly believe that. And some of the best food I've had in my life is like people cooking for me in their homes.
Okay.
And
that's very fair. Do you think that's just the food itself, or do you think it's the whole experience? And maybe for you, the meal is the experience.
I want to go out and eat, and because I love restaurants, but I prefer just cooking. But there are, like, on this trip, there was a couple experiences that stick out. When we got to Bogota, I have to look up the name of this restaurant, but there was this vegan restaurant, total beautiful hole in the wall. And it was some of the best vegan food I've ever had in my life, but it was a tiny kitchen. It was like 12 seats in the restaurant.
Perfect.
And then there was a restaurant in Ho Chi Minh City that made these like over the top gourmet vegan bone meat sandwiches. And I think about those sometimes. Her girlfriend and I ordered like half the menu, and everything on the menu is delicious. So like there are places that just hit it. But it's more rare.
Okay. That's very fair. And I for me, I do think that sometimes the food itself matters, but the experience matters almost more. So yeah,
absolutely. I
get that. So a question that I think is a little bit odd to ask, maybe in some podcasts, or maybe you wouldn't think I'd ask, but of all the places that you have been, you don't have to have an answer for this, but what's a place that you have been to that if you never go back there again, doesn't have to be a bad thing, you're good?
Cuba and Bali, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And Costa Rica, I guess, right? But if things changed,
I'd love to go back.
Mm-hmm. But
I mean, the people in the Costa Ricans are amazing people, and so are the Balinese. I mean, they're just really, I mean, I just had so many beautiful interactions with locals, and I hope something changes because I just see it getting worse and worse and more toxic there.
Yeah. What was the first place you said?
Cuba. Cuba is rough.
Yeah.
I think things will change there at some point in the future when the government changes, but right now it's a rough place to live.
And it sounds like this is not one of my final questions, but I just want to ask you, when you do go to places, whether it's, and I don't know how often you've solo traveled, or I guess I should say I don't know how often you solo travel now. I know
most of my life has been solo travel.
Okay. But whether it's solo or with a group or with someone else, do you make it a point when you're in places like this is, I have to talk to local people. I have to, and I believe I know the answer, but, knowing the answer, why is that important to you to talk to people? And for me, it's not just locals. It's anybody. It's tourists. It's other travelers. It's anybody, but especially locals if I can communicate with them.
Well, because I'm not traveling to check a box, which I think is becoming part of travel. People are love saying, I've been to 52 countries. I've been to 24 countries. I was like, yes. What did you do there?
Right.
Where did you go? Who did you meet? What did you learn? What did you take away? And
for some people, travel means I'm going to go lay on the beach for a week.
Yeah,
and
which is my idea of a nightmare.
Okay, that's a vacation. That's not necessarily travel, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
But to each their own,
it's
right?
Fine, to each his own,
exactly.
Right?
Yep.
But when I think about travel, I think about like getting into the shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that you create more experiences and you learn more, and the experiences that you can have just by having a conversation with someone that you wouldn't normally have can completely change your life.
Yep.
So I agree. I think even if you're not comfortable with that, typically talking to strangers, whatever, figure out a way, man. If you want to create memories that will last a lifetime and stories that you can tell on a podcast like this, I think you got to do it. You have to talk to people.
I agree. And I commend you for getting on this. I think it's a beautiful idea and very noble. And I hope your podcast blows up because people love listening to travel stories.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. I'm not done with you yet, buddy. So just a couple more, though, because I won't keep you much longer. So I want to know, so of all the places that you have been, where do you have to go back?
Oh, I have to go back to India.
Mm-hmm.
But India is a place you just need months. I can't even fathom going there for less than a month.
Really?
Yeah. I want to go back to Peru.
Yes.
Yeah, Peru is really beautiful, and I would like to spend more time there.
Mm-hmm.
I think I left this off my list, but I did a 2-week solo trip in Iceland, and I'm a photographer, and it's like you could wake up at 2:00 in the morning and go out into Iceland when everyone is sleeping because it's daylight and take incredible photos. And
what aren't you, Joshua?
I'm not a mathematician.
There you go. And not a Shakespearean, but go ahead.
No. Actually, I that was like the second class I did well in was Shakespeare, and I ended up.
Okay. It was the poetry.
I loved it, and I ended up becoming a child actor in theater for a few years before I dropped out of school.
Fantastic. That's awesome. I did some acting, but yeah. Anyway.
Nice. I would like to go back to Iceland with my real camera equipment and just take photos. It was so beautiful. It's such a beautiful, weird piece of earth.
Can I ask you another question that's not on my list?
Yeah.
So when it comes to photography, when you're traveling, do you feel like I do that there's a line, like there's a fine line? Like I can spend so much time taking photos, but I feel like then I'm not just experiencing, but I want to capture those memories that I can look back and not just remember. But do you feel like it can be too much?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I'll just go out in a city without my phone or my camera to have that experience. Yeah. But I also love taking beautiful photos. So I think I have a good balance. And, I just love really good photography when the mood is right. I don't think I obsess over it that much.
Yeah, I think that some people, though, just put too much emphasis on the photos and don't get to actually experience as much as they could be.
Yeah, especially with phone culture.
Yes. Final 2 questions. The one is, of all of the places in the world that you haven't been, where is the one place that you have to get to?
I want to go experience mainland China. And that's kind of been on my bucket list for a long time, but it's such a huge piece of land. So that's one place. Turkey was where I was supposed to go. It had there been a 120-day visa. So I want to go to Turkey. And I want to go to so over the years, I've been training to be a captain. I want to be a sailor. And one of my dreams is to sail through the South Pacific. I want to go experience Micronesia and Polynesia by boat, and New Zealand. I want to go to New Zealand.
Yeah. That's where my daughter lives now, so I'll meet you there at some point.
Oh, nice. That's really cool.
Yeah,
one of my closest friends is from New Zealand.
She went to school in Prague, which I think I mentioned. She did a semester abroad in New Zealand, and she met a boy, and yeah,
nice.
And they've been together for a couple of years now. And so when she graduated, that's where she went.
That's cool. What did she study in Prague?
She studied journalism, travel journalism. So she's
awesome.
Yeah. So wonderful. That's awesome. You're my new best friend. Okay. So final question. And I know you, some people, when I talk to on the podcast and I ask this question, I don't know what's happening and I don't know exactly, but where are you going? I know you have some stuff lined up.
I mean, we're moving back to New York in a couple months. Mm-hmm. I built this house in Boulder 18 years ago, and it's a beautiful cedar A-frame. It's an Airbnb. It's called the Rusty Skillet Ranch and Day Spa. You can look it up.
There you go.
I love sharing it with lots of people, but right now I'm going to be here for the next couple months and looking for an apartment in New York and moving back in June.
And then do you have plans to go outside the country or have you?
None. We have to focus on work. I'm actually launching 2 new companies and that I've been working on for the past year.
You're insane.
And so I just really need to hunker down. And Lindsay's launching a vegan lasagna. I call it a ghost kitchen. It's technically not a ghost kitchen, but it's vegan lasagna that's only delivery. So I don't know what the name for that is, but
okay.
In New York City. So we're going to be hunkered down for the next year.
Okay. So even the RV, the road trip thing, that's on hold for
off
a
the
bit.
Table for a while.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Anything you'd like to add? Anything we missed that maybe as we were talking triggered in your mind that's I gotta tell this one before we go? Anything?
No, I think this has been a delightful experience and I really appreciate you having me on, Bill.
Perfect. And that was my last question, was anything you'd like to add before we go? And that sounded like what you'd like to add. So I appreciate this time with you more than anything. It's been a wonderful hour plus, almost hour and a half with you. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I know that, I didn't get a chance to talk to your friend in India, but I know that if you had spent more time with him instead of falling asleep, he would have told you that you're going to do just fine. So, and I'm interested to see what happens with these other 2 ventures that you have going on. And so I'll be following you, and everyone else can too. And I'll make sure I post some links, and we'll post some photos on Instagram. So thank you again for your time, Joshua. This has been really enjoyable for me.
Likewise, Bill.
Thanks a lot, man.
And there's another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast in the books. Thank you so much for listening today. It was another great guest with some great stories, as always, and I hope that you will support all of the guests by checking out the show notes and going to their web pages, seeing any socials and projects that they may have going on. And please, again, I'll ask as always to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really does help to allow the podcast to grow and reach more people, and I appreciate you for doing that. Also, if you haven't done so, check out the website, whybpodcast.com, where you can find blog posts. If you'd like to be a guest, please register to be a guest on the site, and check out the merch page. There's some really cool stuff if you're interested in representing the pod, along with some other cool travel items and apparel that I'm working on every day as well. Join me again next week for another great guest with more incredible stories. New episodes drop every Sunday just after midnight Eastern Time. Until then, thank you for being here, and have a great day.